Hello students, welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Welcome to a session on economy this week, wherein we'll be taking up some of the very important economics related articles that have appeared in various business related newspapers, and we'll be analyzing these particular articles. For this particular video, I've chosen the time period from 24th of February to 8th of March 2020, and the articles that have been chosen are from Hindu, Indian Express, Business Standard, Live Mint and Business Line. Let's begin the discussion. Before picking up any newspaper article, many of you have requested for me to analyze the impact of COVID on the Indian economy. It could be discussed in a larger picture, that is, it could be discussed under the social impact, the political impact, or socio-political economic impact also. But restricting the discussion to only the Indian economy or the economic impact of COVID-19, I'll give you certain brief, very important points. To be more precise, please understand, nobody can expect or give you a correct estimation of to what extent this particular COVID-19 will have an impact on Indian economy. I can prove this particular point by putting forward some of the growth estimates for the last fiscal as well as the current fiscal, which have been given by various agencies. The growth estimates for the current fiscal vary from 1% to 2%, 2% to 3%. But don't worry about the growth estimates for a simple reason. Right now, nobody can exactly tell you as to what will be the exact impact of the COVID-19. But nobody can deny the fact that this will have a negative impact on the Indian economy. Now, how do you evaluate this particular impact? How do you ensure or how do you understand this kind of an impact? Let me give you a very brief idea. Please understand, in economy we discuss the concept of a four factors of production. There is a concept of a four factors of production. These particular four factors of production are land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. Is it okay? Land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship. Now, just to make you understand in what way you need to remember the impact of COVID-19, I'm just going to modify this particular entrepreneurship into, let's say, firms or companies. Again, I'm making this particular modification just to make you understand how do you remember the impact of COVID-19. Generally, entrepreneurship is the fourth factor of production, but just to make you understand, I'm just modifying that into firms or companies. Now, focus on the four factors of production. Within this, I'll focus on labor, I'll focus on capital, I'll focus on companies. Because obviously, land, what kind of an impact of COVID-19 can you expect on land? But overall, if you see, the idea of acquisition of land or setting up of enterprise or by acquiring land, that has been disrupted because of the COVID-19. But let's be focused on labor, capital, or firms or companies overall. With respect to labor, if you have seen the last couple of months, the issues that are appearing in the newspapers, and in the last 1 week itself, you must have seen what kind of a havoc this has created on the supply of labor to various industries. Indian economy, the backbone of Indian economy is basically the labor. And please understand, within this particular labor, the most important part of the labor is a migrant labor. In case of Indian economy, in the last couple of months, especially in the last week, there has been issues with the migrant labor. The labor which has migrated from one region to another region is moving back into their respective states. And when the labor is moving back into these particular respective states, what will happen to labor supply for, let's say, automobile sector, for, let's say, construction or real estate, for, let's say, manufacturing sector generally, the supply of this kind of a labor will be affected. And when the supply of labor gets affected, what will happen to the manufacturing activity, or to be more precise, what will happen to overall economic activity? The overall economic activity will be disrupted. The companies or the firms might find it very difficult to get access to cheaper labor or even get access to labor at this point of a time. And please understand this also, once the migrant labor moves back to the respective states, it is very difficult to get them back into these particular sectors because they will have to be moved from again one state to another state, and you can see the chief ministers of various states struggling to convince the migrant labor to stay back. So this is one economic impact of COVID-19. There will be shortage with respect to supply of labor. And if you know anything about the Indian economy, or to be more precise, the labor issue in Indian economy, already Indian economy is suffering because of a lack of skilled labor. There's a huge amount of labor which is in the informal sector. Now, various state governments, in order to promote manufacturing activity, are relaxing these particular labor codes. This is the first impact. Second, another very important impact has been the impact on the another factor of production, capital. Please understand, in capital, we will be discussing or we will be looking into the problems of the banking sector. We will be looking into the problems of NBFCs. And in the last couple of months, you must have read about some of the banks which are coming under scanner because of NPS. One particular bank which has come under scanner because of a mismanagement of the financials. The urban cooperative banks are coming under the scanner. The mutual fund companies are coming under scanner. All of this, in one or the other way, have been affected by this particular pandemic. Please understand, the banking sector usually lends huge amount of money to industries. Any doubts related to this? The bank will give loans to industries. Industries will take loan, produce goods and services, supply goods and services to the market. Now, what has happened? Because of the pandemic, there is a disruption which has been created in the economy. There is a disruption which has been created in the economy. The demand has been disrupted, supply is getting disrupted. In simple terms, the performance of the companies or the revenues of the companies have been disrupted. When performance or revenues get disrupted, is it okay if I say that the companies may find it difficult to repay the loans? Some of the companies have defaulted on the repayment of the loans. And when this kind of an uncertainty exists in the market, do you expect the banks to give more loans or reduce their exposure to the industries? Generally, what the banks will do is, they know that there's a volatility in the market. They know that the businesses are finding it very difficult to sell the goods or services, generate revenues. Hence, as a bank, you will think from your perspective, you will try to cover yourself and reduce the exposure to these particular sectors. In what way? You will reduce giving loans to these particular sectors. Even if you give loans, a rate of interest will be higher. And that is exactly what you're seeing in the present situation. RBI in the last couple of months has reduced the repo rate in expectation that banks will give more and more loans to the companies. But what is the reality? Have banks increased their offtake of credit? Have banks reduced their lending rate? You must have read the statement by the finance minister, the RBI governor. All of them are asking the banks to lend more and more in the market. But banks will have to be very careful with respect to their own balance sheet. They are worried about the non-performing asset. They are worried about the volatility or uncertainty that is present in the market because of the pandemic. As a result of all of this, do you think banks will increase their lending? They may not increase their lending because of the higher risk that is present in the market. Next, within the credit sector, there is also important role played by the non-banking financial companies. In the last couple of months, even before the onset of the monsoon, you must have read certain issues that are plaguing the NBFC. So in the last couple of years, NBFC sector has been plagued by various issues. For example, there was a problem with respect to IL&FS, one of the biggest NBFCs which defaulted on the repayment. That started the slot in the NBFC sector. As a result of that, even today you can see that NBFC sector is finding it very difficult to get access to credit, to give loans to various sectors in the market. So overall, in case of capital, we can see that there are problems with respect to circulation of capital, pushing up of capital in the market. And when capital is not available at right rate of interest or at lower rate of interest, you cannot expect the companies to take more and more loans and start production process. Moreover, even if the companies would want to take the loans, there should be presence of the demand in the market. What has happened to demand in the market? With the onset of the pandemic, what you can see is the unemployment rate is increasing. The salaries, wages or incomes of the people are getting affected. And whenever this happens, can I simply say that there will be a problem with respect to aggregate demand of goods and services in the market? No doubt, people will continue to consume necessities. Essential items will be consumed no matter what. But what happens to other sectors? There is this concept of a paradox of thrift. What does it say? Or what does it more importantly mean? Understand this. If you are an employee X, you are getting 100 rupees in the form of, let's say, wages. Part of it, you will use it to consume goods and services in the market. Just like you, there are many other people in the market. All of you come together. The demand put together is called as an aggregate demand. As incomes keep on increasing or you are earning guaranteed income, the demand will also be existing in the market. But because of the pandemic, what has happened? The unemployment rate is increasing. The salaries or wages are being cut. The migrant labor is unable to get even access to food, forget about wages. So in this particular situation, can I simply say that the aggregate demand is expected to come down? When the aggregate demand is affected, understand this very carefully, when the aggregate demand gets affected, the production will get affected. Because if you are a company, imagine a situation, you are a manufacturer. The demand for the goods and services that you are supplying has taken a hit. So will you supply more or reduce your supply? That's right, you will reduce the supply. And since you have reduced the supply, what will happen to employment? You will fire or you will leave out a certain number of employees. You will ask some of the employees to go home. They will not be earning wages or incomes. And since they are not earning wages or incomes, their expenditure in the market will again come down, which will lead to what? Reduction in the supply, again leading to unemployment. So you can see the pattern here. This is a self-reinforcing cycle. This is the basic concept of a paradox of thrift. Overall, what will happen? It will have a greater impact on the GDP of an economy. So this is another very important parameter that you need to understand with respect to capital. Fourth, entrepreneurship or firms or companies. So within firms or companies, you can basically divide them into services and manufacturing, or export oriented or domestic oriented companies. One of the important outcomes of the pandemic has been that the exports have been affected. But more importantly, remember this. Even before the onset of the pandemic, India's exports have experienced a declining trend. There has been one problem, or this has been one problem with respect to Indian economy. And with the onset of pandemic, this particular exports have been affected more. That is one issue. Second, the manufacturing sector entities, the supply of raw material is getting disrupted. The trucks are unable to transport the raw material from one place to another place. The transportation or logistics sector has been disrupted. The manufacturing sector has been disrupted. Labor availability is difficult now. So as a result of all of this, in addition to problem of demand as well as the capital in the market, what has happened? Even the firms or companies are experiencing the distress because of the impact caused by the COVID. Now, as a result of all of this, you can see there is a problem with respect to labor, there's a problem with respect to capital, there's a problem with respect to firms or companies. Again, these are the overall points. Within these particular points or within these particular headings, there will be multiple impacts. So as you can see, the impact of COVID-19 is overarching. It has impacted on almost all the sectors in the Indian economy. So what will be the overall impact? One, there will be unemployment rate that will be happening, no doubts related to that. There will be reduction in the expenditure, the overall expenditure I am referring to. So as a result of all of this, you can see that there will be an overall economic impact of COVID-19. You can summarize the economic impact in some of the points, such as one, Indian economy will further go through slowdown, and various experts have warned that there could be a situation of a recession in the Indian economy. There is no doubt that the global economy will incur or will have to go through recession, especially in the European market. But will Indian economy go through the recession? It all depends on 3 points. One, what will be the final impact or till what time period this particular impact of COVID is expected to continue? Till which month it is going to continue? And second, from which date the economic recovery is going to start? And third, at what pace the economic recovery is going to happen in the Indian economy? Based on all these three parameters, the economic impact of the COVID-19 will be evaluated in case of Indian economy. First, I said Indian economy will sure experience a much more intense slowdown. In extreme cases, we might end up incurring recession or entering into recession also. Second, unemployment will increase. The unemployment numbers were already high in case of India. This particular number is expected to increase. Certain sections of Indian economy will be bearing the brunt of this particular impact, such as migrant labor. These are some of the, again I'm saying these are some of the economic impacts of COVID-19 on Indian economy. Again, I've tried to give you answer in a precise way, very brief way, so that you can write an answer for, let's say, 250 words. Now, with this, let's start the discussion in relation to the articles which have appeared in various newspapers. First article I'll be taking is related to ease of doing business. First and foremost, what are the important points? Ease of doing business report is published annually by World Bank. Please make a note of it. Usually UPSC has the tendency of asking these kind of questions on the reports as well as the publishing authority in the prelims. So first and foremost, this particular report is annually published by World Bank. Second point, usually the World Bank takes into consideration performance of various economies in 10 parameters. How is the performance of these particular economies in 10 parameters? Evaluation is done. Based on it, ranking is provided to the economies. Third point, the performance of Indian economy over a period of time, especially in the last couple of years, has improved in case of ease of doing business report. As per the latest report, India's ranking is 63rd, and compared to last year, India's ranking has jumped up by 14 positions. That is improvement by 14 places. Fourth, in case of India, please remember this, to calculate this particular ranking, World Bank used to consider 2 cities. That is, the performance of 2 cities were considered to give ranking for India. One was New Delhi and second one Mumbai. But this year, World Bank has stated that from next year's ranking, rather than being focused the performance of only 2 cities, they will be considering 4 cities. So this particular condition is not only applicable to India. World Bank has stated that all those particular countries which have a population of more than 100 million, in all those countries, rather than considering only 2 cities, they will be considering 4 cities. In case of India, in addition to taking into consideration the cities of New Delhi and Mumbai, World Bank from next year's ranking will consider 2 more cities, that is Bangalore and Kolkata. So these are some of the very important points related to ease of doing business report. Now let's enter into the report. The report specifically has stated that the performance of India in some of the parameters has improved over a period of time. And to name some of them, the report states the performance of India under insolvency resolution, the performance of India in terms of norms for starting a business, next in terms of promoting trade across barriers or borders. In some of these particular parameters, performance of India has improved. However, the report also states that India's performance in some of the parameters needs huge amount of improvement. For example, they have quoted certain numbers related to India's performance, such as to resolve a dispute resolution case at a lower commercial court. In case of India, it takes around 1445 days. That's a very high number. Second, in terms of registering a property, in case of registering a property in India, it takes on an average around 58 days. And moreover, it says that it also costs around 8% of the property value, which is much higher compared to the global standards. So on one side, India's performance has improved, and on the other side, India needs to pick up its slack in various parameters, and some of them have been listed in the report. But moreover, the article discusses a bigger picture. On one hand, the government of India says that or has taken reforms which have added to the improvement of doing business in India. But on the other side, some of the recent events that have happened in the Indian economy basically cast a shadow on these particular reforms. This particular article discusses one very important event that has happened that is related to AGR issue. Now, if you don't know what is an AGR issue, let me put this particular concept in a nutshell. These particular companies, that is the telecom companies, have taken spectrum from the government or have been allocated spectrum by the government, Using the spectrum, these particular companies will generate revenues. Part of the revenues have to be given to the government. Understand this? This particular model of a revenue distribution is called as a revenue sharing model. And if you see the evolution of telecom sector in India, initially we started, post 1991, we started with the liberalization in the telecom sector. And the first telecom policy was introduced back in the year 1994 itself. And under this particular telecom policy, we introduced a concept of a fixed payment module, wherein for every circle where the licenses were issued to these particular telecom companies, a fixed amount of payment was supposed to be given by these particular telecom companies. But over a period of time, this particular amount which was fixed kept on increasing. The telecom companies payment also kept on increasing, as a result of which there was a financial pressure on the telecom companies. That is the precise reason in the later part of 1990s, Government of India revised the telecom policy and introduced a new telecom policy, under which rather than having a fixed payment, they shifted to a revenue sharing model. The revenue sharing model basically considered two concepts. One, they were supposed to pay an amount in the form of spectrum usage charges, SUC, and second, they were supposed to pay certain amount of license fees, SUC and LF. And how much is the payment done under SUC and LF would be decided by the revenue generated by these particular telecom companies. Now let me give you certain numbers. The government under the new licensing regime or new telecom policy decided that the licensing fees that will be paid will be 8% of adjusted gross revenues, and the spectrum usage charges was fixed between 3% to 5% of adjusted gross revenues. Now the contention is not between these particular numbers related to SUC and LF. The contention between telecom companies and the Government of India is on what should you consider under the adjusted gross revenues. That is, if I am a telecom company, your government, you will allocate certain spectrum to me. I will use the spectrum, I will conduct the business and generate revenues. Part of the revenues are directly related to the usage of the spectrum, and remaining are indirectly related or not at all related to usage of spectrum. The telecom company's argument was, when you decide what is an AGR, adjusted gross revenues, you should take into consideration only those revenues which are related to usage of a spectrum. Whereas Government of India stated, no, that is not how I will be calculating AGR. I will be calculating AGR based on what is your revenue generated because of spectrum usage as well as a non-spectrum related revenue. So in simple terms, telecom sector said AGR must be a smaller number, Government of India said AGR must be a larger number. This particular contention of what should constitute AGR has gone from 1 year to the next year. So this particular issue has been taking place for the last 14 years. Now I will not be discussing the judgment. All you need to understand is this. Finally, Supreme Court of India very recently has stated the argument of Government of India in calculation of AGR is correct. The definition of Government of India in AGR is correct. Now as a result of this particular order of Supreme Court, the telecom companies which were not paying the Government of India this particular SUC and as well as LF for last, let's say 14 years will have to pay up this particular amount. Now here comes the interesting part in the calculation. These telecom companies will not only have to pay the SUC as well as LF for last 14 years, they will have to pay penalty for paying this particular amount late. And not just this, they will have to pay interest on the SUC as well as LF for 14 years as well as interest on the penalty also. So overall, this particular number will be a gigantic number. That is a precise reason various experts are saying if this particular order of Supreme Court of India is implemented and collect the money from these particular telecom companies, some of these particular telecom companies will have to shut down the shop. And the danger to that is this. If these particular telecom companies such as Vodafone end up shutting the shop, the number of participants in the market will be reduced. Effectively, there will be two market players. I'm using the term effectively because on paper there are three players who will be left out. One is BSNL, second one is Reliance, and the third one is Airtel. Although there are three players, effectively the majority of the market share is held by only two players, Airtel as well as Jio. The danger is that we might end up having a duopoly situation or only two players in the market, and that will basically reduce the option or the choice for the consumers. There is this particular concern. And moreover, various experts are saying if this is implemented, it will majorly dent the image of government or the business in India. Investments will be affected. Foreign investors will be very much worried about what will be the government policy, let's say after 10 years. If the policy of the government or the dictation of the government or the argument of government suddenly changes, then all of their revenues will come under the scanner of the government. Apart from this, the major impact of the consumers will also be felt. For example, you must have seen in the recent times, the telecom service providers have started increasing the charges with respect to, let's say, data. Earlier, they used to provide huge amount of data at a very lesser price. But because of various issues now, because of a lowering in the number of the telecom players, the data charges also have increased. All of this put together will dent the telecom sector or the dream run of telecom sector, which was considered to be one of the very important success stories of LPG reforms in India. So the article basically discusses this issue in a nutshell. I've tried to expand it so that you will get a better picture. So this is the discussion related to first article. Let's solve certain questions here. Which of the following cities are included in the calculation of ease of doing business report 2020? First, Kolkata, Chennai, Delhi, Mumbai. Right now, for this particular EODBR 2020, we have included Delhi as well as Mumbai. So, right option will be option C. Consider the following statements. IMF publishes ease of doing business report. Wrong. It is published by World Bank. India is ranked at 63rd position as per the latest report. Yes, this is the correct option or correct point. Right option will be option B. Only second statement is true. Consider the following statements. World Bank in publishing EODBR would consider 4 cities from every country from next year. This is wrong. Please be very careful. World Bank has stated only those countries which will have a population of over 100 million will be considered. That is, 4 cities from these particular countries will be taken into consideration. From India, the cities that would be considered are Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata. Correct. So the right option will be option B. Now let's look at the next article related to Discoms and smart metering. Now first of all, what do you mean by smart metering? Generally, the concept of a smart metering refers to replacing of the present analog electricity meters with the digital electricity meters. Now the concept of a smart meter is, it is not just digital, it will keep on relaying the information related to consumption from the consumer to the supplier, that is a distributor. Hence these are referred to as a smart meters. Now why it is there in the newspaper? Please understand, Government of India very recently has stated that they want the states to start replacing these analog or old electricity meters with the smart meters in the next couple of years, to be more precise 3 years. And not only this, in this particular fiscal year's budget itself, Government of India has allocated 22,000 crore rupees for conducting this particular function. This article discusses the fact that the Government of India needs to do more in the electricity segment or electricity sector rather than only replacing the analog meters with the smart meters. Now, what is this argument put forward in the article? First and foremost, if in the next 3 years, all these analog meters are to be replaced with the smart meters, one, it will incur huge amount of expenditure. As per the article, this would require anywhere around 1 lakh crore rupees. And the Government of India this year for full electricity sector has allocated only 22,000 crore rupees. So you can see there is a huge difference between what is actually required and what is actually allocated. The argument of the article is, if there is a difference, it simply means the difference has to be filled in by the state governments. Now the question is, where is the revenue for the state governments to fill in this particular gap. That is the first one. Second, the state governments can participate and provide this particular gap in the form of expenditure. But please be aware, once the Discoms participate and provide for this particular expenditure, the supply of electricity or the cost of supply of electricity will be increased. The Discoms will increase the cost of electricity. This will put a burden on the consumer in the market. So the cost of this particular replacement could be transferred on the shoulders of the consumer. That is the first issue. Second issue, government says with introduction of a smart metering, it is going to address the AT&C issue in electricity sector. Now question is, what is AT&C? AT&C stands for Aggregate Technical and Commercial Losses. In the electricity sector, that is in the power sector, huge amount of electricity is lost. Now before I tell you more about AT&C, please note down these 2 points. There are 2 issues which are concerned to the power sector. One is called as a billing efficiency and second, collection efficiency. Now, what is the billing efficiency? Billing efficiency refers to the concept wherein how much of the electricity supplied is getting billed. I'll repeat the statement. Billing efficiency refers to how much of the electricity that is being supplied is getting billed. If a Discom supplies, let's say 100 units, is all the 100 units getting billed? This is called as billing efficiency. And on the other side, collection efficiency means out of the total supply that is done, how much actually collection happens. On how many units the collection is actually happening. The Discom sector suffers from both the billing efficiency as well as collection efficiency. Now come back to the AT&C, Aggregate Technical and Commercial Losses. The power sector in case of India suffers from aggregate technical and commercial losses. Now what do you mean by this? Whenever electricity is supplied from point A to point B, some of it is dissipated. That is, in simple terms, some of it is lost in the form of heat. And when it is lost in the form of heat, this particular electricity which is lost, the revenue on this is not generated. On the other side, there are issues such as subsidies. There are issues such as power theft. As a result of all of it, there are commercial losses also. So there is a technical loss, there is a commercial loss. Now with the introduction of a smart metering, understand this, with introduction of a smart metering, Government of India says that aggregate technical and commercial losses are expected to come down. They are going to counter this particular issue of AT&C losses, which is expected to provide benefit to the Discoms. But various experts have pointed out that with introduction of a smart metering, under which basically this is how it is going to function. I have installed a smart meter in my household. I have got an option of choosing the supply of electricity from multiple suppliers in the market. I will choose, let's say, to consume 1 unit of electricity from a specific supplier and I will pay for 1 unit of electricity. It is as good as the system of a prepaid telephone connection. Again, please understand this. The issue with this is, yes, I have got an option of consuming electricity from the multiple suppliers, but this is going to address only the collection efficiency. That is, how much I consume, I'll pay for it. The collection of supplied electricity will be done. But the question is, how are you going to address the billing efficiency? So various experts have pointed out that with introduction of the smart metering, only the collection efficiency in the Discom is going to be promoted or it is going to be improved. But billing efficiency is going to continue. These are some of the points which have been mentioned with respect to the decision of the Government of India to introduce a smart metering, right, and replace the smart metering with the analog meters right now. One more very important point, the concept of a smart metering is not very new in India. Some of the states already have in partial or in fraction the concept of a smart metering itself. So these are the important points. Based on this, I have given a descriptive question. Though the idea of a smart metering is a step in the right direction, there is a need to do more to address the issues of the power sector. Elaborate in 250 words. Next, there is an article related to PM-KISAN. Government of India has introduced this particular scheme, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. Under this, Government of India intends to transfer 6,000 rupees of income support to these particular households which own the land annually. That is, annually these particular households will be provided with the income support of 6,000 rupees. Another very important point is this particular 6,000 rupees will not be transferred in a lump sum. Rather, they will be transferred in 3 equal installments of 2,000 rupees each. Okay. So this is one of the very important schemes introduced by the government to provide certain income support to the farmers and at a bigger level try to achieve or move towards doubling the income of the farmers. But more importantly, what is being discussed in the article? The article says that this year Government of India expected to cover 14 crore farmers under this particular Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi. But because of reluctance of some of the states, because of opposition or delay by some of the states, this particular number, which was earlier estimated to be 14 crore farmers, has been dragged down to 12 crore farmers. And the 2 states which have been mentioned in this particular article are, one, the state of West Bengal, which has stated that it will not be part of the PM-KISAN scheme, and the delay by some of the other states such as Bihar, as a result of which Government of India's estimation of covering 14 crore has been reduced to 12 crore rupees. Not only just this, as a result of the reduction in the number of farmers who will be covered, the expenditure of government which will be incurred to provide PM-KISAN is also expected to come down. Now, apart from this, another very important point that has been mentioned is the concept of agriculture census. Understand this, the government once every 5 years will conduct a census called as agriculture census. In this particular census, they basically try to find out how many units of farming land are there in India, how many farmers are there in India, how many households own agricultural fields in India, what kind of a farming is conducted in case of India, whether it is a small farming, marginal farming, so on and so forth. And the data which has been taken for providing the coverage for PM-KISAN is from agriculture census itself. So these are some of the very important points which have been mentioned in this particular article. Now let's go to the next very important article, that is the issue of the bailout of Yes Bank. Now this particular Yes Bank was one of the very important prominent private sector banks in India. Yes Bank was very aggressive with respect to acquisition of larger borrowers in the market. That is basically, understand this, although that is it was provided license very recently in the last decade itself, started functioning as a bank in the last decade itself, it was very aggressive with respect to the idea of a lending. That is, usually in case of banks, you will see that they are focused more on retail borrowers. That is, they want to acquire a large number of borrowers who will require small number of loans as such. But the portfolio of Yes Bank was very aggressive with respect to large amount of lending. But more importantly, understand this, what is the issue at hand? Very recently, the financials of Yes Bank deteriorated. The non-performing assets suddenly shot up in the last 5 years. It was very closely observed by RBI, and finally, RBI took a decision to bail out Yes Bank. But more importantly, RBI has changed the composition of the board for Yes Bank and has stated that this particular Yes Bank will have a composition of 6 members. That is, the new board of Yes Bank will have a composition of 6 members, which will comprise of 1 MD and CEO, a non-executive chairman, 2 non-executive directors, and remaining 2 nominees directors will be done by SBI itself. Now, why specifically SBI? We will go to the first part of the article. That is, RBI has basically fixed the capital, that is authorized capital of rupees 5,000 crores for Yes Bank. Now, what do you mean by authorized capital? There are 2 terms related to the concept of capital in this context. One is authorized capital and the second one is paid up capital. Now, what do you mean by authorized capital? Authorized capital is the amount of money that the companies will be raising by selling the shares or equity in the market. I'll repeat the statement. Authorized capital is the total or the maximum amount of money that the company will be raising by selling the equity or shares in the market. And apart from authorized capital, there is another capital called as a paid up capital. Now, what is the context where you will come across these concepts? Usually in context of a Basel guidelines, public sector banking, you will come across the concept of a paid up capital. Now, what do you mean by paid up capital? Initially, I said authorized capital is the maximum amount of money that can be raised. The final value of money that can be raised is 5,000 crores. But let's say rather than raising 5,000 crores, I am allowed the limit of 5,000. But what if I raise only 2,500 crores out of allowed 5,000 crores? Have you understand this? I am allowed to raise 5,000 crores by selling the shares in the market. But rather than raising 5,000 crores, I will raise only 2,500 crores. Am I allowed? Definitely yes. The maximum limit is 5,000. But I am raising how much? Only 2,500. So the ceiling which is allowed is called as authorized capital. How much we actually raise is called as paid up capital. Have you understand the difference between both of them? Authorized is how much maximum I am allowed to raise. Whereas a paid up is how much I am actually raising. So understand this particular difference. Right now focus on authorized capital. Yes Bank has been allowed to raise a maximum amount of 5,000 crore rupees. And out of this particular 5,000 crore rupees, around 49% of this particular amount will be paid up by State Bank of India itself. That is, State Bank of India has agreed to purchase 49% and invest the money in the Yes Bank. That is the precise reason when I discussed the composition of the new board, two of the directors were to be appointed by State Bank of India itself. Now, this is a factual information. What is important in this particular discussion? Focus on what was the issue with respect to Yes Bank. I said Yes Bank was very aggressive with respect to lending. Usually, I said the banks will try to focus on large number of borrowers. Rather than this, Yes Bank focused on large borrowers. That is, the basic difference is, if I lend to 5,000 people a small value, okay, so I am lending to 5,000 people a small value of loan to each of them. Yes Bank basically said, no, I will not lend to 5,000 people. I will lend to, let's say, 100 people, but the value of a loan will be very high. So again, I'll repeat the statement. Usually in case of banking, the banks focus on number of borrowers. We want to lend to huge number of borrowers. But Yes Bank was very aggressive and focused on large borrowers. That has been one issue. And when large borrowers take the loan, don't you think if some of them default on the repayment, obviously the credit of the bank or the capital of the bank will deteriorate. The non-performing assets will start increasing. That is the reason in the last 5 years, between 2014 to 2019, the non-performing assets, which were less than 1% for the Yes Bank, ballooned to more than 7% by 2019. And that is the precise reason. On one side, the NPAs started ballooning. And on the other side, it was finding, that is Yes Bank was finding it very difficult to raise capital in the market. Because please understand, under the Basel guidelines, you will have to meet certain targets such as a tier 1 capital, tier 2 capital. One of the ways of a tier 1 capital is what? You will have to raise the money in the form of a paid up capital. I can understand the concept now. That is, you will have to sell your equity in the market and collect the money. So look at this. On one side, NPAs are increasing. Risk related to the bank is increasing. And on the other side, the bank is finding it very difficult to raise the capital to meet the Basel guidelines. As a result of this, what happened? There was a downgrade in the credit rating of the bank. And when there's a downgrade of the credit rating, it will find, or any company would find it much more difficult to raise the capital in the market. Because downgrading means risk associated with investing in this particular company has increased. When the risk increases, do you think people will invest more or invest less? Obviously, investment took a hit. This has been one of the prominent reasons for the downfall of the Yes Bank. And finally, RBI looked at the situation and said, we are going to revamp the board of the Yes Bank. Now, apart from this, various experts have criticized the handling of the situation by RBI. Their contention is very simple. First and foremost, why did it take so much of time for RBI to finally take a decision? Why was Yes Bank not kept under, let's say, prompt corrective action? Then decide to change the board. Second, if you're guaranteeing to the people that nothing is going to go wrong with the Yes Bank and everything will be taken care of, why is that you have stopped the normal operations of the Yes Bank? Why have you put restrictions on, let's say, withdrawal limits in case of Yes Bank? So these are some of the reasons which have been cited by experts with respect to handling of the Yes Bank situation by RBI. But beyond this, there is one concept that you need to be very, very careful with respect to UPSC. In the discussion related to the Yes Bank debacle, there was a concept of 81 bonds. 81 bonds basically stands for additional tier 1 bonds. I'll repeat it, 81 bonds stands for additional tier 1 bonds. Earlier I mentioned that the bank is supposed to follow the Basel guidelines. Under the Basel guidelines, they will have to maintain certain capital adequacy ratio. And to meet the capital adequacy ratio, they will have to raise the tier 1 capital. And one of the ways to increase this particular collection of tier 1 capital is a bond which is issued called as additional tier 1 bond. Now what is the speciality about this particular bond? Please remember these particular features. These bonds will not have a fixed maturity period. They do not have a fixed maturity period. Rather, they will have a clause of a recall. That is, imagine I've issued a bond to you, the 81 bond, you have purchased it. What will be the maturity period is not decided. As a bank, as an issuer, I will say after 5 years, I will recall the bond. After 10 years, I will recall the bond. In any case of other bonds, there will be a maturity period. There is a tenure. But in case of 81 bonds, there is no fixed maturity period. That is the first very important point that you need to remember. Second, there is a coupon amount paid in case of these 81 bonds. That is rate of interest paid. But if the issuer falls into a distress, there is a financial stress on the issuing authority. That is a bank in this context. They may skip payment of the coupon. Second very important point. Third very important point. When these 81 bonds are issued, in the conditions the issuing authority, that is the bank, would have written, in certain situations of a distress, these 81 bonds will be written off. Written off means what? I've issued a 81 bond to you, you have paid me 100 rupees. Rather than giving you back 100, I'll basically say, I'm sorry, I'm going to write off this particular 100 rupee. That is, I'm not going to repay the 100 rupee to you. So this is another very important condition related to 81 bonds. That is the reason 81 bonds are also referred as perpetual bonds. Perpetual bonds or hybrid instruments. So please be very careful with respect to all these terms in relation to the Yes Bank debacle that is happening. So these are some of the very important articles as well as the issues and the questions related to these particular issues for this particular time period. Thank you. Have a good day.